My question is,
do you think that the Kashmir freedom struggle reached its climax at a very wrong time and went out of the control of Pakistan also?
Basically, for somebody at it, let me tell you that the Kashmiri movement, to me, it is indigenous. No amount of foreign aid or foreign prompting can let a people resist 6 lakh forces for such a long period of time. If only we had prompted the Kashmiri movement, it would have died down long ago. So I don't agree that we can really, we have lost it or we gained it. It is the Kashmiris who have risen up. Whatever we are giving them is pittance. If at all we are giving them military aid, it is a pittance. I have, before coming to this academy, I had a chance to meet some Kashmiri leaders via the Kashmir Media Service, and they told me that you, the press people, must highlight the plight and you must give us some weapons. We fight with stones sometimes, we fight with bad weapons. We can't fight the Indian army. So I don't think we are really, in real terms, helping the Kashmiris militarily. Would you like to add anything?
I don't think that the Kashmir movement has reached its climax yet. When it reaches its climax, then India will have to quit Kashmir. That will be the climax of it.
I now go on to syndicate number 6, please. Anybody?
They want to understand, as it is sometimes suggested by our intellectuals and writers, that Indian leadership from South is less hostile to Pakistan. And now that their Prime Minister belongs to Pakistan, do you think he will be less hostile, or what are the prospects of our future relations in the backdrop of personalities?
You are right, it has happened traditionally that a southern leader is not as antagonistic towards Pakistan as from the north. But Gujarat's problem is the weak coalition wicket he stands on. Sitaram Kesri is going to pull the rug from under his feet at the first moment of weakness. So until and unless that southern leader is strong in parliament, I don't think Gujarat can really do anything.
I'd like to add that in countries where institutions are strong, their personalities matter very little. So there won't be any much difference.
Syndicate number 7, please. Sorry.
Imran, I have 2 questions for you. The very first one is regarding the Blue Water Navy and Indian designs to get a permanent seat in the United Nations. How is Pakistan responding to that?
Okay.
And I'll come to the second one later.
Regarding the Blue Water Navy, again it's a case of, personally I think Pakistan is spending very little on its navy. We have acquired the Augusta submarines currently, but still I think as far as the navies are concerned, strategically Pakistan is totally out of balance in the naval field. I think Pakistan's best intentions can be to protect its water boundary near Karachi. And
besides, India also has 2 aircraft carriers. Pakistan has none, and India also has nuclear submarines.
The second part of the question, and what was that?
Regarding the permanent seat of India in the United Nations Security Council.
Yes, there was talk in SARC too, and one of the proposals after the SARC conference has been that SARC countries should be given a seat in the UN Security Council. They haven't mentioned the word permanent, but this is a proposal. I think this is a field in which India wants to get into there. But currently, I don't think it is possible that the UN superpowers, the big 5, will agree to India being included in the United Nations Security Council.
Now, the second question is that in your report, there seems to be no solution to the Pakistan-India problems. We seem to be at deadlock and there is no headway. Where do we end up then?
We end up in the sea if India continues on the same policy. It is indeed tragic. However, if at all during the past 5 or 6 years any movement has been made, it has been made now. Pakistan has a strong Prime Minister. Let us hope the impending Indian elections take place sooner than later, and we have a stable government in India. Probably a stabler Indian Prime Minister and a stable Pakistani Prime Minister. They might be able to move forward. The working groups are good. They are a good proposal, and if at all the foreign secretaries are going to meet next month, then we'll know about the concrete shape of these working groups. I agree with you entirely. There is no easy one-page solution to the Pakistan-India problem. We go on to the next syndicate, that is Syndicate 7. Engineer.
My question is a bit explicit. It is alleged that our foreign policy regarding India has been playing into the hands of our armed forces personnel rather than those of our foreign officers. Your comments, please.
You are right to a certain extent. The South Bloc or the Foreign Office of India is much stronger in foreign policy making as compared to the Foreign Office of Pakistan. In Pakistan, it would be wrong for me to obfuscate the issue that there are many centers of foreign policy making, and indeed the military is one of them. In India, what happens is that the military input goes into the Foreign Office at a lower level. In the Pakistani situation, the military input goes into it at a higher level. General Karamat makes some statements. But coming to the principle of it, I think it's the military which has to deal with India mostly. So their input has to be taken. It is basically the question of input taken at what level, at a middle level or at the higher level. I feel that the input should be taken at the middle level and the concrete policy should be made by the Foreign Office, and Pakistani Foreign Office must be stronger as compared to what it is today. I feel that. Right. We go on to the next syndicate. Yes, Ishaq.
Some quarters have recently extended a proposal that a confederation should be established between India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. How do you view that?
I'm sure this statement is not going to find any favor in Pakistan. Confederations in the present political situation of the world tend to change into federations after 20 years. So gradually the central authority keeps on increasing. So this idea appears preposterous to me. Anybody would like to add anything? Next syndicate, please. Syndicate number 8.
I would like to add that the history of India and Pakistan is replete with animosity, and if they are not able to live peacefully for 50 years, how can they live under a confederation setup?
It's a far-fetched idea. Syndicate number 8, please.
Syndicate 8. You have insisted that Pakistan should maintain 3:1 ratio as far as military expenditure is concerned with India. But after both the countries have achieved nuclear capability, they haven't gone to war with each other. And in 1988 and in 1992, I think, war was averted 2 times just because of nuclear capability both the states have. How do you react?
Before I let Zah finish the question, I'd like to tell you that this nuclear deterrence it is a very good idea. It did indeed stop war 2 times, as you mentioned. It was 89 and later on in 92. But the problem is there are some situations in which the nuclear deterrent cannot be used. Suppose you were the Prime Minister or the Chief of Army Staff with that magic button to use the nuclear deterrence. You came to know that the Indian forces have launched an offensive on Muzaffarabad. They're not going to take you on the mainland, but they have invaded Muzaffarabad and they intend to take Muzaffarabad. Then the question is very difficult. Would you use the nuclear deterrence then? At what level? Or would you use the nuclear deterrent when they intend to take Lahore? So therefore sub-conflicts, that is smaller conflicts like Siachen and smaller border disputes, in these places the nuclear deterrent becomes inoperative, and these have to be fought with the conventional advantage.
The 2 crises in 1986 and 90 are quoted most frequently for the aversion of a war between India and Pakistan. And in simple words, the argument is that of balance of terror. So that is why, because both sides realize that the mutual costs in case of a nuclear war would be too high on both sides. So that is the answer to your question.
Okay, now the names mentioned in the list are Meraja Mufti.
So my question is this, India and Pakistan are pursuing different foreign policies, each catering to their own national interest. India aspires to become an international or world power. as evident by its effort to become a military power armed with a nuclear punch, a rapidly growing economy coupled with its efforts to get a seat in the United Nations Security Council. Besides, it has achieved the status of being the blue-eyed boy of the West. Now, would you tell me where do Pakistan stand and what should be its foreign policy to deal with such an enemy?
That is what we have been saying all along, that India is a formidable enemy. But what Pakistan can do is rely on multilateralism and make more allies. Iran is one example. The Central Asian republics are another. We have to shift from the Cold War era to the new era. Europe probably. You're absolutely right that India is a formidable enemy diplomatically as well as militarily. Next on the list is Rashid Ahmad.
Pakistan is an ideological state. Even India believes in the ideology of Akhand Bharat. In this situation, do you believe that any arbitrary solution can work and both the countries can resolve the issues?
It is basically the post-independence generation, that is me and you. When we are probably at the helm of affairs, or some of our friends are, probably this would be a possibility. I agree that the partition generation finds it difficult to reconcile with each other. But I recently saw a program on satellite in which many Pakistani sections of the population were asked whether they would like better relations with India. And I was optimistically surprised to find that most of us really do want better relations with India, provided the core issue is solved. We are strong about Kashmir, but other than that, I think we are ready to have friendly relations with India. But I think the Kashmir issue is the core irritant.
I'd like to add that countries with different ideologies, they have settled their disputes. And the same is case with India and Pakistan. But the initiative has to come from India.
The next on the list from Syndicate 9, anybody, the last two syndicates?
My question is about options available for resolving the Kashmir dispute. You have enumerated 9 options, but you haven't enumerated of military option. I would call it jihad option, and if someone is irritated by jihad movement, I would call it a military option, because you see globally when Argentina occupied Falkland, then the Great Britain didn't opt it back to or back to diplomacy, but it is resorted to military option. And similarly, in South Africa, the people first fought war on ground, and then they resorted to the back to diplomacy. And similarly in Chechnya, the people have fought, and after that they have gone to diplomatic table. In Kashmir, people are fighting against Indian oppression, and ISI is backing those people. Why you haven't or why gone for the military option when we are spending so much on the army, on the defense, and our 34% of budget goes on the army? Would you please elaborate?
For any military option, first we have to put our house in order. We are on the verge of defeat. Our conventional military strength, we are inferior to India. For any initiative, any strategic initiative, you have to have a conventional superiority. Look at the figures of the 2 armed forces. Look at the weaponry. So first we have to be strong, then we can take initiative.
And there is another thing. Basically, if we go for the military option or we go for military conflict, you see it won't stay as a limited military conflict. I mean, it has spillover effects, and as we know, I mean, nobody wants war at this time. I mean, if we can solve this issue peacefully, of course, I mean, it's not as easy as that. Just going in for a military option, we can give moral support to the Kashmiris, and that we're doing. But we can go for a one-minute question.
Shahid Sahab, as far as you mentioned that we are spending about 34% of our GDP on defense, we are spending that kind of money to deter war, not to wage a war.
He says how to liberate Kashmir.
You have to wait for that, please.
Syndicate, I have a comment to make. There was an arms race between USA and USSR. USSR broke down because it could not sustain the economic cost. Now Pakistan's economic situation is alarming. Don't you think Pakistan's collapse is imminent considering the defense expenditure? Why not unilaterally freeze defense expenditure for 6 months as goodwill gesture? I think this will put moral pressure internationally on India to cut down.
That is a good option. I'll agree with it. We have to ask the armed forces whether they can sustain their punch, as they say, with a freeze in the defense expenditure. India raised its defense expenditure by 21%. So it is really very difficult when your neighbor keeps on increasing with quantum leaps for you to remain static. But it would be a good moral diplomatic move. Please, those who haven't asked the questions should please now ask the questions in the end, because everybody has to ask questions. The people in the list. I have been instructed.
You have mentioned in your report about some dangerous proposal relating the resolution of the Kashmir dispute to the Sachin dispute. And where you suggest that if we settle these peripheral issues, the core issue like Kashmir issue can be settled later on. So do you agree with this, that we should go for the peripheral issues and then the core issue?
I think Amir answered the question that at the current moment India is suffering more in Sachin. So if we relieve them of the Sachin pressure, they are not likely to really solve the Kashmir issue later on. It is slightly far-fetched that if Sachin is resolved, that impetus would actually solve Kashmir. I think Pakistan does need to put pressure on them via Sachin now, because initially they invaded, now they're hurting more in Sachin. So if really they make some propitious moves in Kashmir, that is reduction of forces, downscaling of the human rights violations, and indulge in a positive dialogue, I think then we can think of Sachin. But in the current mode they are in, it would not be right according to me to solve it.
And Kashmir is the core issue, we believe, and rightly so. Without finding an amicable solution to this problem, it would be very difficult for Pakistan to talk on other issues. In the context of Kashmir issue, the other issues become non-issues. Ular Biraj is not that big an issue. First, we must solve the Kashmir.
If everybody has asked the questions, then is anybody left? No, I mean the ones listed, the ones who were supposed to ask questions. Okay, Ziba, right.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the syndicate, I would thank you all for asking questions from different angles so as to further explore the length and breadth of this issue. Now, I would like to invite the members of the panel one by one to enlighten the audience with their expert views and broaden our intellectual horizons on this issue with their vast experiences. Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor of having with us a reputed and respected Pakistani diplomat, retired Ambassador Mansoor Ahmad. He has served Pakistan Foreign Service with great distinction. His overseas assignments include Tokyo, Ankara, Jakarta, London, Bangkok and Geneva. He has served in different senior capacities in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I would request Mr. Mansoor Ahmad to come and share his experiences with us.
Thank you very much. May I first of all apologize for not being here for the presentation of the report. I unfortunately had an appointment which could not be rescheduled. I feel sorry that I missed out on the presentation. But I'm glad that I was present for the question and answer session, which extremely animated, if I may say so, and certainly reflected the passion with which the report appears to have been written. Let me just say that I have read the report and I enjoyed reading it, and I must commend the syndicate for the hard work which I'm sure must have gone into its preparation. I think a lot of the specifics have been covered in this question and answers section. So may I, if I have your permission, make 2 or 3 very general observations. The first observation that I would like to make is that any paper on international affairs has to be brutally honest, it has to be brutally objective. Not only about the other party, but about yourself. There must be no confusion between ideal and actual, no confusion between the real and the wishful, and no confusion between posturing and policy. I think these distinctions need to be made when you are formulating a paper on foreign policy. And there has to be a total acceptance, if I may say so, of one's own contradictions and of one's own limitation and of one's own inconsistencies. This is extremely important if you want to formulate the right policies or the right reactions to other people's policies. I'm reminded, this is a parenthetical remark, I'm reminded of something which I'm sure the students of psychology know. There was a psychologist, a German psychologist in the early part of this century called Gestalt. And he advised people to put themselves, perhaps once every day, perhaps every alternate day, in somebody else's position and look at the world from that other person's point of view. I think it's a very good exercise which the ministries of foreign affairs in most countries can undertake, and certainly young people who in the academies and so on are formulating the papers on international affairs. Now, if foreign policy, and I'm sure everybody is agreed, if foreign policy is a function of the national security requirements, then the first fundamental question that needs to be answered in any paper, and certainly in a paper which deals with the relationship with the most important country that Pakistan has, the first fundamental question that needs to be answered is, have Pakistan's requirements of security been met in the policy that has been pursued, in the policy which is recommended? And this question was asked towards the end. The social, the physical infrastructure, the decline, the precipitous decline which has taken place in this country in the last 50 years, do these things meet the requirements of security? If we are going to continue on this path, then I'm afraid India or any other enemy that Pakistan may have needs to do nothing at all. We are doing it very effectively ourselves, destroying ourselves. And I think this kind of fundamental question must be asked and must be answered. Dr. Mahbub al-Haq, I think, has a book which came out a few weeks ago on the social and human development in the subcontinent. It makes horrendous reading. What is happening to education? What is happening to shelter? What is happening to basic medical needs and so on? And even defense expenditures, there has been talk, defense expenditures have to be maintained. They can be maintained. But if the country is in dire economic circumstances, in dire economic straits in 5 years' time, where would that defense expenditure come from? So these fundamental questions, as I said, they have to be faced. There is in the paper a reference to linkage. I think we need to ask ourselves, is linkage desirable? And we must answer this question not from the point of view of India. We have to answer it from the point of view of Pakistan. What is it that we put in jeopardy if we have linkage? What is it that we can do if there is no linkage? Again, a fundamental question which needs to be answered. Now, on Jammu and Kashmir itself, law is on our side, morality is on our side. No one has any quarrel with that at all. But unfortunately, that is not how the international community always works. And you have to deal with a world which does not work on the basis of law and morality. This is sad, but this is true. And again, facts have to be faced, objective realities. The United Nations, it has its limitations. It has its inconsistencies, and these limitations, these inconsistencies, are the limitations, the inconsistencies of its individual members. I think a question was asked, what happened at the Human Rights Commission on Kashmir? Well, there are countries, maybe Iran, maybe China, which does not want this question before the Human Rights Commission. There are issues on which we don't want to be seen as taking a public position on human rights questions. Who takes care of the Kurds in the human rights? They get beaten up every week. Only yesterday the Turks beat them up. No one takes any notice of that. So I think one has to recognize that law and morality are not the criteria on which interstate relations are conducted. I think one also has to recognize that there are issues which cannot be solved immediately, which may not even be possible to solve in the short term or in the middle term. One has to recognize these realities. I think Willy Brandt recognized this reality when he ventured on Ostpolitik. And in 20 years' time, well, things happened perhaps much quicker than he'd anticipated, or anyone had anticipated, when East Germany fell into West Germany's lap. He decided on a policy of non-confrontation, on a policy of peaceful engagement, on a policy of cooperation. Japan has taken a similar position on the Northern Territories. Japanese territory, which one day before the end of the war, the then Soviet Union declares war on Japan, occupies those islands. But Japan has not gone to war, is not prepared to take a hostile, confrontationist position on those islands. So you find examples of manner in which national questions, territorial questions have been tackled in a way different from the way we have. The basic question, again I come to fundamentals. The fundamental question is, where should Jammu and Kashmir fit on the agenda of national priorities? Does foreign policy take a first position? Does J&K take a first position in the foreign policy priorities? Or do economic, social, developmental questions take first priority? And then you see where foreign policy questions fit in and where J&K fits in with the foreign policy. I think principles have been mentioned. I'm a little shy of this word. We all have principles, but maybe principles are something that you don't talk about in polite company. So they should certainly not figure on research papers. I think national self-interest is what should figure on papers dealing with international affairs. Nuclear question, sensitive. sensitive and also important because it gives a country a national image. A lot of countries want to be nuclear because it gives them a national image. But I think, again, one needs to look at it very carefully. Very, very carefully. The first question, do military equations matter in the modern world as much as we think they do? The Soviet Union had nuclear parity with the United States. For 30 years, it had the same number of ICBMs. It had the same number of the intermediate nuclear force. It had the same, if not more, of the conventional force. But where did it land, the Soviet Union, in 30 years' time? Total disintegration, total collapse. So, this question also needs to be addressed. Do military equations matter? And particularly to the developing countries, which depend on the outside world for military supplies. Do military equations matter in their case? The obvious truth for me in this context is that India is in a far better position with its indigenous production, with its large size, with its superior education, technology, and so on, at this level. Again, on the nuclear question, do we assume that we will use it, the nuclear weapon? If we assume that we are going to use it, I'm sorry, the consequences are going to be too horrible. We have a land border with India. You bomb Delhi, you also send the radium clouds to Lahore and elsewhere. Do we intend doing that? The standoff is based on unacceptable damage to the other party. But if we are going to inflict unacceptable damage to ourselves, where does the nuclear thing figure in your strategy and in your so-called policy of deterrence and so on? What is the other assumption? The other assumption is deterrence. Well, we take this concept from Washington, Moscow. We say deterrence worked. But you must look at the differences. Deterrence worked because Washington and Moscow were divided by an ocean and a continent. They did not have physically contiguous borders. And in any case, they spent half the time in negotiating how they would not use the nuclear weapons, the ABMs, the strategic arms limitations, the hotlines and so on. They were all designed to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. So this factor has also to be considered when one talks about a policy of nuclear deterrence. There is a third possibility mentioned, which is that of ambiguity. It is an attractive idea, it's an attractive word, and so on. But the questions you need to ask when ambiguity is proposed as a policy. We've had ambiguity ever since Dr. A.Q. Khan spoke to the Indian journalist some years ago. Has it modified Indian policy vis-a-vis Pakistan? This ambiguity, has it modified Indian policy on Jammu and Kashmir? I don't see it. Ever since 1990, they've given hell to the Kashmiris. 10, 12, 15 people get killed every day. There are 500,000 men there now. So, has this policy of ambiguity led to a modification of Indian policies? Has it strengthened Pakistan's negotiating position vis-a-vis India? This question is to be asked and answered concretely, specifically, not by way of opinions, but on the basis of facts. One of the virtues of having nuclear deterrence or a nuclear weapon is that it brings down your conventional arms expenditures. Has it brought down Pakistan's conventional arms expenditures? I think this also has to be answered. So, on the nuclear question, I think these are some basic fundamental questions which I thought needed to be addressed. Personally, I feel that Pakistan's economic needs constitute today the centerpiece of our national agenda. And so do the priorities of the rest of the world today in the post-1989, the post-Cold War world, the post-Berlin Wall crumbling down world. There was only, I think, a few weeks ago, a basic resolution from the European Union saying that in future their relationships with the rest of the world, particularly the developing world, is going to be determined on economic grounds. So economics has to be the centerpiece of the national agenda, and in this centerpiece you have to fit in your foreign policy and you have to fit in your foreign policy questions. India, United States, Jammu and Kashmir, and so on. I think it is possible to have a working relationship with another country without literally going into an embrace. You know, after all, at the height of the East-West confrontation, at the height of the nuclear standoff, they were also negotiating. There were the Helsinki Accords in early 70s. There was the Conference on Security and Confidence Building in Europe. There were the ballistic missile arms limitation talks and so on. So it is possible to have a working relationship and not an embrace. I think this possibility also needs to be posed and then its implications spelled out. These were some of the general points, ladies and gentlemen, that I wanted to put forward a bit to you. May I once again say that the paper needs commendation, needs praise for the hard work which has gone into it, and as I said, for the passion with which it has been. Thank you very much.
Whom all of us are well acquainted. He is a renowned economist and has special interest in international trade, particularly having a deep insight into Indo-Pakistan. Mr. Waqar Ahmad, please come and enlighten the audience with your views.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have enjoyed this presentation and the report gone into it. What I especially liked about this report is the attention to details. Various, you see, the canvas was quite wide, and it would have been pardonable if you had ignored some of the details or some of the minor points. But you have done a thorough job. You have analyzed issues and you've talked of all possible options, and everything has been put up in a very organized manner. I do hope that when you go to your offices, you are not spoiled by the system working there. My apprehension is that you will lose your appetite for work and become a part of the machine. But I would urge you, and I'll also hope that you will retain your intellectual curiosity, your capacity for hard work, your capability to look into an issue thoroughly, analyze objectively, because this is what will carry you through the career. So So I hope you are not distracted by the general atmosphere in the offices, which is not really very helpful for a thorough professional approach to your work. But I hope you will set traditions. You will create a new culture. I must also pay compliments to those who asked very good questions. Some teasing questions, some provoking questions. In fact, one of the questions I liked was about the common man. As I reflected on this, particularly with reference to Kashmir problem. You see, my hunch is that, contrary to what you said in your report, the common man is the problem in solving Kashmir issue. You have listed all the options. Can you really visualize a government which will agree to a partition of Kashmir, or which will agree to any of the other options which have been put forward from time to time? Probably left to themselves, the governments of India and the government of Pakistan, or the politicians of India and the politicians of Pakistan, may go for one of the options. But why don't they go for it? The fear of the common man. When Khushwant Singh came to Lahore and he spoke at the Pearl Continental Hotel, one of the things, first thing he said was, forget Kashmir. No government in India will agree to any solution of Kashmir, because the first thing that will happen is that the government will collapse. The people will not let that government survive. Even the people in the government, even the individuals may not be able to survive. I think the same thing can be said about the government in Pakistan. Our people will not accept, this is the conventional wisdom or conventional understanding of our social milieu, that our people will not accept a compromise on Kashmir. What we say, the principled stand on Kashmir, we are not in a mood or in that frame of mind where we could accept any adjustments in that stand. Of course, you can say that the governments themselves have fed the common man and raised the temperature so high that it's so difficult to bring the temperature down. Now the common man is on a very high pedestal, and he is not going to allow the government to accept any compromise. Even Mehbubulah's option, which is really not an option, it's a postponement for some time of a final solution. But even that has earned Mehbubullah a lot of brickbats, lots of name calling. So we are not even willing to accept, it's a technical way of bringing in the UN once again and occupy a central position and accept a position, UN trusteeship of Kashmir. I thought Pakistan should be happy with that kind of option. But our government, our press, our media, our intellectuals, probably they will not even listen to it. Trade, Mr. Mansoor Ahmad has, of course, talked about trade and this linkage between politics and trade. I don't have to say any more on that. But you see, I feel sad about this whenever I come across this discussion or with issues relating to Indo-Pak relations, particularly the trade issue. 1986, the Uruguay round started. We have signed the agreement, we have signed SEPTA, and yet we are still discussing whether to have trade with India. Twice we have signed, which is a solemn commitment. My wish and my desire, and I am sure your desire also, would be that Pakistan should have the image of a forward-looking, responsible, serious member of the community of nations. A nation which can take care of its affairs and which stands by its government. Now, when I find such casual attitude that we sign 2 agreements and yet we are not taking that step to formalize our government. And mind you, the clock started ticking on 1st January 1995. The transition period of 10 years has started. 2.5 years of that have gone. We are left with a transition period of only 7.5 years. And we are only talking about opening trade with one country. The problem that we think will face us if we have trade with India, you will have the same problem when you trade with any country in the world. Thailand will pose the same danger. Philippines will pose the same danger. Indonesia will create the same problems. But this obsession with India, with what India can do or what havoc India can create in Pakistan's economy, I think we are losing confidence in ourselves. One small thing about trade with India. Do we have a person in Pakistan whom we could call a specialist in India, who thoroughly knows the working of the Indian economy, who has specialized in it, who is the India watcher, and who knows how the Indian economy works, what are the various policies in different sectors in India. I happen to know the bureaucracy, senior bureaucracy, fairly well, and I still can't locate the person whom I could say that, well, this is the person who can handle our issues, our negotiations with it. We must know the country first. In India, Jawaharlal Nehru University has a very large section or department of Pakistan studies. We don't have any equivalent of that kind of institution in Pakistan. The South Asian Studies Institute or other institutes, there are no comparison. So, instead of wasting this 2.5 years on whether we should trade with India or not, I think we should have got down to work, trying to understand the working of that country, their policies. Then we could come up with a package or with a negotiating position. Right now, the Ministry of Commerce cannot really articulate what are its objectives while negotiating with India. The strategy. What positions you are going to take with India. They hired a consultant, and of course they got a very capable and competent person. But I doubt if more than 5 or 6 people read his report. In India, as the Uruguay round started, they got Montek Ahluwalia from the World Bank and put him as Secretary of Commerce at the head of the Ministry of Commerce. So they know how to do things. we have yet to start working on the mechanics of trade negotiations. And mind you, you are going to have the same problem with every other country in this world. Because India, of course, can exploit you, but so will other countries. One last point I must say about secularism. Mr. Chairman, and my compliments to you, the way you have handled this discussion. You certainly look like a very credible chairman. And certainly a very presentable chairman. But you have mentioned secularism and saying that Indian secularism has been exposed because of its treatment of the minorities. Secularism is a dirty word in Pakistan. We translate it as Ladini, a Ladini Nizam, agnostic or atheist, something like that. Yet we expect that India will retain its secular system. That is some kind of a guarantee for tolerance or for better treatment of minorities. I think we have to make up our mind. Is secularism, which is a dirty word for us, why do you prescribe it for India? Why do you even expect India to be secular? Let them go the BJP way, let them have Advani and whoever is there, and let them have their own system. Why do we worry? It's a bad system, so why must we insist that India should follow it while we have rejected it? But in the end, my compliments to you again. I have really enjoyed reading this. Thank you.
Rashid Malik from the Department of Political Science, University of Punjab. He has written extensively on Indo-Pak relations. I would request Dr. Rashid Malik to please come and further elaborate the sensitive issue of Indo-Pak.
For providing me an opportunity to share my views with you on this very important sensitive topic. My all appreciations and compliments for the report and also the way Mr. Imran defended it at all costs. And so far as I will make only a few observations. A lot has been said about the issue, about the problems. Somebody described this report as presenting only the official point of view of Pakistan's government on problems between Pakistan and India. I would not call it an official version. I will just use kind of words. I would say that the issues, though dealt exhaustively and with a lot of hard work, have been dealt in a narrow, limited and restricted perspective. In my view, certain new realities in South Asia have not been mentioned or included while dilating on the issues between Pakistan and India. For example, on Kashmir, one of the most important development and new reality is the sudden increase of interest by the United States and international community in this issue on Kashmir. Why the United States and international community has suddenly become active in urging upon Pakistan and India to seek a solution to it. I will give my own version why this has happened, but I will move on to the second important reality in this context, and that is that there has been a change in China's attitude and policy towards Kashmir. Then we should have also touched upon the change in the attitude of smaller countries of South Asia towards Pakistan-India problem, and also the impact that the end of the Cold War has had upon subcontinental issues, and we should have also spoken about the Kashmiri people's perspective. In my view, the reason why the United States and international community is taking an increased interest in the resolution of a dispute on Kashmir between India and Pakistan is that the priorities have changed after the end of the Cold War. There are no longer the political and strategic concerns which are guiding the foreign policies of major players in international politics like the United States, the European Community, Japan, and even Canada. So they have developed a lot of interest in the market of South Asia. We have heard the leaders of the United States saying that the United States has become the largest investor, foreign direct investor in Pakistan, and also in, I think, in India. Previously it used to be Britain, but the US direct investment has exceeded that of Britain. Then this is true that Sino-Indian model is not applicable to the resolution of Kashmir dispute, because as has rightly been pointed out, Kashmir is a dispute which does not relate only to a territory. It's the question of the destiny of a people. But recent developments in relations between China and India have serious implications for Pakistan's policy towards India and towards South Asia. We should have taken these considerations these factors into account. Now there is also an important development in the attitude of the small countries of South Asia. In the initial years of SAARC, and actually at the establishment on the year that SAARC was established in 1985, even then, India had a fear that the small countries would gang up against her, and that's why India insisted on including the unanimity or consensus clause in the charter of SAARC. But recently there has been change in the pattern of relationships between India on the one hand and small countries of South Asia on the other, particularly between India and Bangladesh, between India and Nepal, and even between India and Sri Lanka. We know that over the years there has been a considerable growth in trade between Bangladesh and India. More than 100,000 Bangladeshi students are studying in Indian educational institutions and getting scholarships and other financial assistance. Then there has also been a change in relationship between India and Nepal, although relations between the two countries had remained strained in the past. Then we should also take into consideration the fact that Central Asian republics are not ready to share Pakistan's outlook on South Asia. They have their own outlook, and they don't agree with Pakistan's outlook on South Asian issues. They, as has rightly been pointed out by Imran, Central Asian republics have an interest, and they want to pursue that interest to have a transit link with India through Pakistan, and that's why the recent agreements signed between Pakistan and Turkmenistan on two pipelines, gas and oil, have a provision of exporting the Central Asian gas to third country, and also their oil to third country, meaning India, of course, with the mutual agreement. So these are the compelling factors which should be taken into consideration while evaluating our foreign policy towards India. Then the costs of confrontation with India are becoming heavier and heavier for Pakistan. Pakistan has plainly and clearly been told by the United States that Pakistan's economy cannot be saved from a total collapse unless Pakistan goes for trade with India. And in fact, towards the end, I would say that Pakistan's foreign policy makers have not yet taken into consideration fully the implications of the end of the Cold War. Thank you very much.
Distinguished Foreign Service Officer and a retired ambassador, Mr. Bhatti, who has represented Pakistan with great distinction during the course of his illustrious career. He has maintained an active interest in Indo-Pak relations and contributes frequently to various journals and newspapers. His last assignment was as a member of Federal Public Services Commission. So I request Mr. Bhatti to please come and sum up today's discussion.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Esteemed Director General and distinguished members of the panel, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that I feel very honored to be invited to participate in today's presentation by the syndicate that was entrusted with a very sensitive and important topic of our foreign policy. Let me say to start with that I read the report, which reflected a lot of hard work by the members of the syndicate and also very inspired guidance by the staff member, my dear colleague Mr. Shahid Malik. The presentation this morning of the report was also well organized, and I must say that the questions that covered a very large ground were handled with skill, and as my good friend Ambassador Mansoor Ahmad said, with passion. Now